I swear this video is cursed because I've tried to record it several times and different things have gone wrong each time, both with regards to the game and with regards to things like the video itself. So that's fun. Anyway, hello all the crazy people out there. My name is Michael. I like wizards and dragons and making games. Welcome back to Making Games in GameMaker. So there's been a slight change of plans from what I had planned on doing in this video, which is that before I planned on implementing slopes in this game so that the player can walk up slopes and have it be smooth and all those sorts of fun things. And then I was doing that, and then I realized that it was actually a really, really massive, significant pain in the neck, and I didn't want to do it. So I think what I'll do is I'll put slopes on like the maybe I'll do this later pile of cards, and in the meantime I'll just design levels around not having slopes because there should be plenty of other things that we can do in this game without like having slopes be mandatory. And when I say I'm thinking about, I of course mean that I already did that because I recorded most of this video and then the audio of the recording was all messed up and then I was mad and then I just said, okay, let's start this over. So I've already done that. There's also a little bit of weirdness with Codecks because apparently the slopes card, which was in my hand last time because I wanted to do that, I do not know how to remove that from my hand. And I feel like if we're going to be going this far down, like the metaphor of having cards in a hand in a game that Codecks is doing here, it should be really easy to unhand a card and put it back in the deck. But I don't know. I have mixed feelings on the whole card metaphor in the first place, but I'll save my complaints and or other thoughts about Codecks for the end of the series when it's postmortem time. So in the meantime, I'm just going to have to deal with this card being in my hand forever, I guess. I don't want to delete it because there's still a chance that I'll go back to it, but that just won't be for like a year until whenever I do that. Like, really, I'm not going to mark it as done. No, that's just going to put... Alright, I don't want to waste time on that. So, what I'm going to do instead is going to be moving platforms, and that's going to be a lot of fun. I like moving platforms. I actually implemented it in about 20 minutes the first time, before I realized I had to redo the recording because the audio was all messed up. There's also one bug in particular that I want to deal with, and that is going to be that you see here. This is not something that would have been noticeable, I think, in the previous video because I did not have any shape like this. But if you jump and if you hit your head on something, you appear to get glued to it for a moment, and that is because when you have your final dy set because you're colliding with something on the y-axis, if you set self.y speed equal to 0, that would cause your vertical velocity to get zeroed out and you just start to fall like normal. As it happens, we are not setting our vertical velocity to 0, so that is continuing to be some positive number when we hit our head on the blocks, and that is causing us to get glued to it for a few seconds before we start falling again until the y speed falls back below 0 and we start falling. I'm just going to make that a quick fix. And we can be on our way. Oh, you know what? I'm still in the slope test branch, which I'm going to, at least for the time being, discard. And I'm going to switch back to my main branch, and that's not going to have any of the weird, broken slope code that I had written on my own time. We do still have, however, the slope object and what I called internally the bridge object, which is this thing over here. But yeah, let me re-add that fix. Obviously, it's not impossible to implement slopes in games. Many games have done things like that going back many years, but I don't feel like it. It's annoying and weird, and I want to do as much of the development of this game as possible on recording and not, like, on my own off in the distance, and therefore I don't want to spend a great deal of time on something that really, overall, isn't, like, critical to the game as a whole. Hence why it's going on the maybe later pile. Let's see. So moving objects. Let me go into the gameplay folder, and I'm going to create myself a new 3D object. I'm going to call this object moving, and let's open this. We can parent it to the 3D object. I'm going to get rid of all this because this is all going to be inherited from the 3D object create event. I don't need the draw event. That's also going to be inherited, and I think what I'm going to do is going to be go into the step event and say just for now self.x plus equals 0.5, and then self.update collision positions. And that's going to cause our block to move off in the X direction, and that is going to subsequently update the position of our collision object, and we are going to have a block that's going to move. And I probably should go and like add one of these. Let's get rid of this for now. That's not very important. Like this. So we're just going to instantiate a singular block. It's going to be moving. We're going to instantiate a moving block, and that's going to have its mesh be the obj block singular. So that's going to move. If I jump on it, I can jump on it, but I can't like be carried along with it. If I stood in front of it, then I can't get pushed around by it. That's what we're going to take care of today. So there's a couple different ways of moving objects that you can have in a game. If you were to break it down, you could have an object that's just translating, moving horizontally. You can have an object that's translating vertically, up and down. You could be standing on the object, and you could be carried along with it. You could be standing in front of the object, and you could be like pushed along with it. You could also have objects that are rotating. So if you have like a long wall or something that rotates, you could have that push you along with it. And this is probably the least common version, but you could also have an object that's going to be like scaling, getting bigger, and it could push things that are in contact with it out in accordance with its scale. I'm not going to do the last two. I'm just going to have objects that are translating horizontally and vertically. Rotating will be quite a bit more math. And again, I don't want to spend too much time on something that's not like critical to the game as a whole, because I want to do as much of this as possible on recording, and I don't want it to take 5 years. And scaling, I honestly just don't see that many uses for. So when I was doing this earlier, and when I was had my little failed recording, I realized that there is a bit of a shortcoming in my 3D collision system, and that is that the collision detection methods for spatial hashes and octaves and whatever, they don't return a reference to the object that you collided with, or possibly a list of objects that you collided with. They only return true or false, did you collide with something or not. And it's going to be a lot more, I think a lot more useful if we actually return a reference to the object that we collided with. So I'm going to go into the spatial hash node. I'm probably also going to mention this as an extension to the 3D collision system in that series. Because knowing what objects you're colliding with in hindsight is probably a bit of an important piece of information that most people would want to know. So we're going to be returning that information. So for now, I'm just going to deal with the spatial hashes because that is the hierarchy that this game is using. In check object, if you collide with the plane, it's going to return a reference to the plane. In the regular hierarchy, we can save the result of the spatial hash node check object, and if chunk result is not equal to undefined, return chunk result. Otherwise, we'll just return undefined. That should be all the updates I have to make to this collision system, at least for the time being. Again, it can be made quite a bit fancier later. Let's see. So the first thing we're going to do is, in a moving object, I'm going to create myself... Let's have a vector 3, and that's going to represent the motion of the object. And for the time being, let's make that 0.5, 0, and 0. Unfortunately, in the step event for obj_moving, I can't just say like self.position.add self.motion or anything like that, because I am still using the GameMaker XY variables for object position. So instead we'll have to do this the long way, x plus equals self.motion.x, y, and z. And that is going to accomplish the same thing as before, but we are going to have a motion vector, which is going to contain information about how the object is moving. And that's going to be useful because in, let's say, the beginning of the NPC's end step event, we can simply check for objects that we're colliding with, check for objects that are like below our feet and moving and that kind of thing. We can accommodate that motion in our final dx, dy, dz. So let's see. So first, and this is going to be, as usual, rather messy at first, and then I'll make it look better later. I can say set our collision object shape position equal to the player's position. I'm going to move it 1 down, and that is going to be so that we can check for something below us. And then I can say var below me is going to be obj game dot collision dot check object against self dot see object. And if this is not equal to undefined, so this is going to return a reference to a collision object, right? And that collision object is going to have a reference to the GameMaker instance that it belongs to. And in our case, that's going to be a moving object because there isn't any other type of object in the world right now. So if below me is not equal to undefined, I can say self.xSpeed plus equals actually, you know what? I don't want to add onto x speed, but I am going to want to have like a temporary x speed. I think I'll do it like this. So we're going to have our potential motion, and then that is going to be a vector 3 containing x, y, and z speed. Potential motion is going to be potential.add below me dot reference, and that's going to be the GameMaker instance. And those are going to have their own motion vectors. And then everywhere I see self.x speed, y speed, z speed from here on out, that can just be potential.x or potential.y or potential.z, whatever it happens to be. Tiny bit of refactoring. Also, apparently I put the y speed correction in the wrong place. Oops. Yeah, let's move that back where it belongs. So this little bit of code here should allow me to go and stand on this platform. All right, the game doesn't crash immediately, which is good. And when I jump on this block, we are going to be carried along for the ride. That's fun. And if I were to jump in the air, I can still jump in the air. If I were to go and take a running jump, I would have my velocity added to it, which is kind of fun. If I were to stand in front of it, it is not going to push me along for the ride. That is a little bit annoying. Oh, yes, it is. Apparently there was just like a spot where it didn't work. Maybe I don't know, contacted it from a corner or something like that. I am definitely getting pushed along for the ride. Okay. So that works for basic purposes. Let me see. So there's a couple of things that need to be tidied up about this, I think. One is that this step event is really getting kind of messy, this end step event. I'm going to take this and I'm going to move it to its own method, and we can call this self.check moving objects, and this can be its own method. And let's see. The potential movement actually should stay here. We don't want that. Anyway, if we detect a collision with a moving object below us, now instead of saying potential equals potential.add, we could simply return that vector, and we could return, oh, I don't know, the 0 vector otherwise. And this is just going to be a nice single method call that just returns a vector 3, which is going to contain the motion of anything that happens to be below us. And then we can simply add that value to the potential movement, right? You could chain those vectors together like that if you want to. I don't really want to. And this should leave us in the same place that we were before, except now that our check moving objects code is maybe a little bit more where it belongs. All right, great. It's carrying us along for the ride. Still a little bit of weirdness due to the player's cylinder collider being stuck to the block like that, like hanging off the side. But I think that should be taken care of later on by like climbing detection or something like that. There's a couple ways that could be dealt with. Let's see. I almost forgot to mention that you may notice that we're not perfectly flush against this, ooh, I just fell through you. That's not fun. We're not perfectly flush against the block as it's pushing us, and that is one of the things that I feel like, a little bit of a more robust system would handle, but again, since I wanted to, do as much of the development for this game as possible on recording, I'm not going to lose too much sleep over that little air gap. I'm more interested, though, in exactly what happened. Is it when I try to, like, run through the block? That'll be a little bit more interesting to fix, for sure. Alright, I think it's... Yeah. Alright. Gonna have to investigate that for later. If that's a simple bug, I'll fix it at the end of the video. If it's a little bit more involved, then I will throw it on the list of bugs to fix later. Anyway, there's a couple more imperfections that I wanted to mention. One is that if there's an object below you that is not a moving object, and this is probably the most obvious one, the game will crash because it will then try to get the below me.reference.motion from a object that does not have a motion value. And there's a couple ways you could deal with that. You could check to see if this is actually a reference to a object of type obj_moving, or we could use our fancy collision filtering system. So we have a couple different types of collision masks. We have none, we have the default one, which is most solid objects. We have climbable. We could also add another one that's, for example, motion, or I think moving would be a better description. 0B0100. And in our moving object, the collision masks for all the objects that were created with, do we have ourselves a... Okay, so our default collision mask. This should be, So we can take that optional argument and set it to a value instead of a compile time constant. And from here, obj_moving, our default collision mask can be self.default collision mask, can be e collision masks.default, and we can OR that with e collision masks dot, what did I just call it? Moving. And, oh, let's see. When we go and detect our collisions with the object, we can... Okay, we could either make, like, a temporary assignment. We could either do a temporary assignment to the collision group like this, or this is another thing I might consider doing for this collision system, allowing you to pass a collision group to check against into the check object method. To specify your own. I might think about doing that. Anyway, let me do some additional testing over here. Let's say test block, and instead of creating a moving object, we just create a generic 3D one. And this can be, let's say, 332 in the air and 100 on the Z. If I did not check for only objects with a particular collision group, then the game would crash when I run into it, which is not really what we want. If I were to jump up here, the game is going to crash because, like I said, this is an object that does not have a motion value. But if I do filter for objects only with a collision mask bit of the moving bit, then we should be okay, and I should be able to just jump into you normally. If I were to, I wanted to get on top of that thing, but I wasn't able to. Did I oh, did I do that wrong? Hang on. We do have our default collision mask there. I suppose that can also go, like, below the event inherited call. When you check an object against another, we're checking to see if... Oh, I was gonna say, like, am I, like... Is there something wrong inside the 3D collision system that's causing, like, the groups and the masks and whatever to get mixed up? But, no. Okay, so, that was just a case of if the, if this method was returning here, then the old group was never getting reset. Anyway, it might be neater to edit the collision world check object so that you can specify a group there instead of using the objects, but I'll think about that later. Anyway, if I run this now, I should be able to jump on top of the block, and I should be able to, nope, jump on top of the block. I should be able to move up to this thing and get pushed off. That's a lot of fun. If I jump over here, I can still jump on the block. I can jump over here and still get pushed around by this thing. Unless, of course, I try to move into the block, which for some reason causes me to start going through it. Not really what I want to have happening there, but the behavior when like the moving block goes underneath the static one and me getting shoved off was really what I wanted to deal with here. Let's see. So this should just work. That wonderful phrase in gaming, but if I were to let me say if current time divided by 1,000, then that's going to be the number of seconds since the game has started. If current time divided by 1,000 is less than 5, I'm going to do something, and that something is going to be self.motion.y is going to be equal to 0.5, and if that's not if it's not less than 5, self.motion.y is going to be set equal to negative 0.5. And this is going to be basically an elevator platform. Okay, so that's going to go in the air, and alright, I sort of like jumped into the side of it, which wasn't really helping the demo, but oh, you know what I want to do? This mod 10, and that's going to cause it to oscillate back and forth. Anyway, this is going to give us an elevator platform, and I'm going to have to wait for it to come back down, and we're going to jump on it down here at the bottom, and this should have us going and ascending in the air with the elevator and going back down. There's one little issue here that you might have noticed, which is that, well, I don't know if you would have noticed it here, but you might have thought of, actually you can kind of see it, which is that if the platform is descending faster than gravity is pulling me down, then I will sort of appear to, like, bounce off of the platform. And that's because the block is moving, and then gravity has to kick in before I catch up with it, before I fall and catch up with it, and then I hit the platform and I stop. And gravity, and then the block moves again, and then gravity is, has to kick in before I can catch up with it again. There's a couple solutions to that. One is to just make elevator platforms like this move slow enough that I will never like fall slower than them. And this should take care of that, I think. And another is going to be, yeah, see, the jitter isn't there anymore. Another would be to, if I'm detecting a collision with a moving object a certain distance below me, to automatically, like, snap me to its position. And honestly, I feel like my preferred strategy here is just going to be to do the former, to just level design around it. But if you wanted a more robust solution, you could perhaps move the player collider's position down a little bit more, and, like, snap you to that surface. This is another one of the problems which is exacerbated by the fact that 3D collisions with objects in this world don't, like, generally snap completely flush to whatever they're colliding with, because I don't have a system to, like, displace a collider. I've been debating with myself whether that's something I want to add to the 3D collision system, or if by the time I'm done with the 3D collision system, I'm just going to never want to touch it again. Anyway, I think that's going to do it for now. So this is going to be moving objects. This is largely what I wanted to do in this video, and I apparently, like, dramatically underestimated how much work player being able to ascend slopes was going to be, and dramatically overestimated how much work tests for moving objects and that sort of thing was going to be. Again, this could be a lot more robust, but for like the 5th time today, I don't want to do something that's going to cause this game dev series to drag on for like weeks and weeks and weeks doing very little work. So I think I'm going to call it here. If I were to check off all 3 of these and archive them, yes, I will archive those. Oh, by the way, one more comment on moving platforms. So I'm checking for moving platforms and whatnot in the players step event, or at least in the NPC step event. You could also approach this from the perspective that you're going to test for moving platforms in the moving objects step event, and you're going to see if there's like something on top of each and every one of the moving platforms that can be carried along with it. I am not going to do that because that will open a whole can of worms where suddenly by default things like this stationary block might be carried along with the block that tried to move underneath it, and that's not really something that I want to happen. And I would much rather just have this behavior limited to things such as like the player and NPCs and enemies or something like that if an enemy was to be placed on a moving platform. If this game was going to be a little bit more of a like physics-based ordeal where you had to actually like make objects like that behave and like stick to each other and that sort of thing, I would probably be more inclined to do it the other way around, but in this game, not so much. Let's see. I suppose I still feel really bad for having the like all this code in the NPC's end step event being like this messy and copied and pasted and whatever. Do I want to try and generalize this? Alright, no, I'm just gonna leave that be. Should I leave a comment up here to my future self, like warning me against trying to do this again? Because I have a feeling I'm going to. Everything that I would have done here for moving platforms is pretty much the same as I would have done in like 2D GameMaker for moving platforms, just with like a 3rd axis. So that's kind of fun. Let's see, next time. We're getting down to the end of the things that I think need to be done in basic gameplay. There's the matter of climbing, obviously, but I think I'm going to want to deal with player states and Sahan's snow state extension before I... Did that not get added to the hand? Alright, there we go. Before I deal with climbing, because climbing is going to be much easier to deal with if I have a discrete state for it. And then, of course, there's going to be other states later on in the game. For example, when the player is attempting to cast a spell, when enemies are doing this, that, and the other thing. The player probably jumping and falling are going to be their own states. Maybe some other things. So that's going to be next time. I missed a few weeks posting these Wizard Game videos because, long story short, some other things, such as organizing the Screaming About GameMaker video and the last Spatial Hashes video, ended up taking a lot more time than I really had, and I wasn't really able to sit down and work more on this. So I might try to play a little bit of catch-up with this series because I've kind of been neglecting it recently. Anyway, that's going to do it for me for today. My name is Michael. I like wizards and dragons and making games. If you want the code for this, look for the GitHub repository down in the video description. Look for the, what are we, 0.15 now? Look for the 0.15 release. That was the file system. This was the GitHub repository. Oh wow, I am behind on actually creating the releases. I should do that. I try to post about 2 game dev videos a week, one let's make a game like this, and one tutorial. I like to talk about the weirder things you can do in GameMaker, so if any of that appeals to you, feel free to subscribe. I have a Patreon, so if you want to contribute to the channel, links to that can be found in all the usual places. Otherwise, I hope you all find this interesting, and I will see you all later. Special thanks to Zenjamin, Vitro V, Squarecrow, Syndra Larson, Manta Ray, Harold Gidry, GameMaker, Edward Holt, DJ Gibbles, and Army Armbuster for supporting these videos. If you want to contribute to the channel, head on over to the Patreon page down in the video description to join the fun.